Welcome back. Hopefully you have seen the previous video that I did that went through use of the FieldScout mobile app, which uses Bluetooth to connect to your FieldScout meters, the TDR350, TDR300 with a Bluetooth device, and the TrueFirm meter. Because we will definitely be referring to the data collected in that way as we go through SpecConnect here. So basically, just by way of a quick recap, what we have is SpecConnect, which is what is on the screen here in front of us. This is our cloud-based data management platform. If you sign up for a subscription to SpecConnect FieldScout Pro, that is what connects your FieldScout meter data to your SpecConnect web portal account. So you can see we have the login credentials here, which is how we get into kind of the computer side, which is where all the really cool stuff happens. The app is very functional for connecting the meter wirelessly to a mobile device, but the upload, the automatic upload that happens from that mobile device to SpecConnect is what allows us to do these advanced features that I'm about to show you. One of the first things that's worth going over is if you are new to SpecConnect, you've never logged in before, you're going to want to go to this little button right here, New User or Forgot Password. What that is going to do is it's going to ask you what your email address is. We need your email address when you set up your subscription because we use that to create your login credentials. That kind of becomes your identity within SpecConnect. We'll cancel out of that because I don't want to change my password. But if you've never used SpecConnect before, once you are signed up and the account is live, that's going to be kind of your first step. So what will happen is after you enter your email address in that box and press change password, SpecConnect will email you a temporary password that you can just put your email right in here, and then you can cut and paste that temporary password into the box here and sign in. Once I'm signed in, I'll show you where you can go to actually update your password. So we get logged in here. So just put in our credentials, hit login. So you will notice a couple of things here on my screen that will not show up on your screen. I do have, as an employee, I do have administrator rights, so I can see things that you can't see, which gives me some extra flexibility for a video like this. But just keep in mind, anything really, so we can see these pink shaded areas, anything you see that's pink shaded would not show up on your end. That's something that an administrator would be able to see. But I did mention that once you use that temporary password, up here in the right-hand corner should be your name or something to that effect. That drop-down menu there, we can see change password is right there. You just click on that. It'll ask you for that temporary password, and then it'll allow you to create a password that you can actually remember. You can also see in here we have Weather Underground. We do have ways of connecting weather stations to Weather Underground, and kind of the ability to not only view the information in Weather Underground, but also use SpecConnect to get some really advanced data. We'll actually go into a little bit of that towards the end because we want to focus up front here on the FieldScout stuff. I will take you into user settings. User settings is where you would go just to kind of set up the basic information. So you can actually select a language. You can choose how you want your measurements to be represented based on where you are. You can actually, if you're using alerts functions on the weather stations and so forth, we can actually send a text message to different email phone numbers. We can just kind of customize the way we look at information. We'll just kind of go back to the main screen though. So what we're looking at here is a landing page. Like I said, I have administrator rights, so I can actually go into different accounts. This GIS account is actually based on data that we collected in San Antonio, 2018. We were actually invited to be part of the Gadgets and Gizmos seminar. We set up some weather station equipment, which you can see in here, as well as we had some meters there available for testing. Just got a little bit of hands-on. It's a really a cool seminar. If you've never been to it, it's definitely recommended. What SpecConnect is, again, I've called it a data management platform. It basically is a place where your data gets uploaded and it allows you some advanced tools. So we have a list, kind of a tray of options on the left-hand side here. We're looking at the equipment page right now. What the equipment page does is it lists out everything that you have subscribed to SpecConnect. So you can see we have some Watchdog weather station, Watchdog equipment up here, and we have our TDR FieldScout meters down here. So SpecConnect really has two rooms. So we kind of have a Watchdog room where we take care of environmental weather data, soil moisture sensors that are kind of buried in the ground, leaf wetness sensors, weather stations, ET values, stuff like that would all be kind of in the Watchdog room. And then we kind of have what's the FieldScout or the portable meter room. So if we go into the portable meters into the TDR 150, 350, obviously that would adjust if you're using a 300, TDR 300 with a Bluetooth device or with a TrueFirm. You would be able to select those from the equipment menu, or you can also select those from this drop-down menu. If those items were attributed to this and being used on this account, we'd be able to see those in this drop-down. The FieldScout viewer is kind of our home base for all of our FieldScout data. This is where you're going to go to kind of view visuals of the sessions that you've taken on the field. You can see we also have a drop-down box here that helps us to toggle the information that we're visualizing and that we're seeing on the screen at any given time to kind of dial it into what we are most interested in at a given time. Main thing to keep in mind here is this is a database platform, so we do have to provide it some information. It's not going to be able to read our minds and tell us what we want to know. We have to give it a date range that makes sense to our application, and we have to tell it which sessions it is that we're interested in looking at. And in some cases, we even want to go as far as to define specifically which course it is that we were in. So we'll stick with that information. One cool thing that I'll tell you about, so if you are using the FieldScout meters and you have multiple meters and you say you're a superintendent and you send the watering crews or the assistants out in different directions to take their readings on a given day, you can actually dial this date range in to start and end on the same day. And then in this drop down, you can show all sessions. And you'll actually be able to pull up a satellite image of your property, and you'll be able to watch progress as readings are taken across the course. So it's really a pretty powerful tool. So you can be working on some other things and just kind of have that in the background. Every now and then just take a quick scan at what's going on out in the field and see if there's anything out there that concerns you that you want to address right away. So for this exercise, we'll just go into a previous session that I've already created. You can see once I selected that session, we get a satellite map down here. I got a little bit crazy here, but I wanted to really show off what the potential of this tool would be. So what we're looking at here is a Google Maps image of a golf course where we've taken a whole lot of readings throughout the entire fairway and a bunch of readings down on the green. So we can actually zoom right in on the green surface here. We can get as tight in there as we can. We are just recently switched over to Google Maps, and Google Maps can zoom closer than that, but there's something about the API that we're still learning that doesn't allow us to zoom any further than this for right now, but that is definitely something we're working on so that we can get that in as tight as possible. Down at the bottom of the tray, we actually have some tools here that you'll want to know about. So you can see this gets pretty cluttered. If you take a whole lot of readings on a single green, you can't really tell what the heck is going on there. So what we can do is we can actually hide the data labels. Just cleans that up a little bit, gives us a little bit better vision of what the colors are, where they are, and then if you're interested in any one given reading, we can just click on that reading, and we would get what that value is. Just a quick note, we'll scroll back up to the top of the page here. Again, this drop-down box says VWC. So what that's telling you is that all the readings we're looking at on this particular view is actually, excuse me, are actually the volumetric water content values. We can most certainly just change that to temperature and scroll down. You can see we have a different color range because the temperature is far more consistent than the moisture is in this example. So we'll go back to VWC. Scroll back down here. One other neat little thing that we can do here is we can, if you want to move one of these points for whatever reason, if you try to move it, we get this error that tells us that it's locked. But we have an unlock button down here. We can actually take that, and by doing that, we can actually move that. We do get an unmove. We get one single unmove. That'll take that back to where it belongs. Then we can just lock that just to make sure we don't accidentally move something. But that's a neat feature. We did have some distributor reps that were doing demonstrations that accidentally moved a couple of points when they didn't want to on their demonstration data sets. So they asked us to put that in there, and I think that's really a cool thing. One of the other things to look at is we have kind of some color profile choices here. So what we have here is the ability to define a color profile for a course, this is what I named this course, and we can also do a custom color palette for an individual green if we want. The beauty of that is that we can actually really dial in the information that we're looking at. So as conditions change throughout the year, perhaps a set of numbers might be appropriate for the shoulder seasons, but in the mid-season when we're really under heavy stress, we might want to dial things in even tighter. So you can see it defaults to the default color scale here. We can actually use a drop-down. I've actually named these. So these are actually individual color palettes that I have custom defined. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And I've named them moisture, temperature, salinity, but you really don't have to do that because when you create a data set or a color palette for your data set, you actually can go into that one single data set and define each individual one. So we'll go to June because that's kind of what we've done with June. So for this course, right now we're telling the map that we want to see the June color scale. We can also go in and we can say for number 10 green, we want to see something. You can see it's now telling us that we have changed that green is going to be a different scale than the rest of the map. So it's just an opportunity for us to look at the information in just a little bit different way. Then we can just go ahead and go back to the dashes, and what the dashes mean is that we are just carrying over the same color scale here into the individual green. All that happens is in this settings button. We click this settings button, we can see we are in June. If we drop down that menu, you can see the others that I created, but we're going to stay in June. So VWC right now, so you can see we can choose the color scale that we want. So we can do a rainbow where red is very low VWC. We can do scales of blue to represent moisture where lighter blue is less water. and then we can flip the rainbow down here. So there's some options. In this drop down, this is where we choose the individual parameters, and we can actually customize each and every one of those individual parameters in June. So if you want to have a month to month or a color scale differences that are dialed in for different months of the year, you can do that. Whatever makes sense to you. You definitely have the opportunity to create a new profile. These are all completely customizable. Name it whatever you need to. Then what you do is you just go station to station, VWC. So if we are maintaining our greens on a daily basis, anywhere between 12% and 19%, we can dial that in. And what that does is you can see that we can change the low and the high, and what that does is it gives us a little bit more definition for each one of these color ranges. We then can go into EC. We can decide that 0.25 is the low end, and we're not really getting concerned until we get to 1.25. Whatever that means to you. So we can do color gradients of green. We can change that, and we flip the scale here. So lower salinity is green is good, higher salinity is red, that's bad. So you can dial that into any set of numbers that you want. Get that as close as you need to. We just go right down the line. Again, we can flip the scale, and cooler temperatures, depending on the time of the year, this might change. But right now, spring going into summer, lower temperatures are good, higher temperatures are bad. So if we go here, maybe we're doing cool season grass and we want to be cognizant of anything over 90, and then maybe 75. So we just kind of want to know, we want to dial in that scale to meet our needs at a given time. Once you're done with that, you just go ahead and save and exit. And those changes have been made for the June color scale. So then if we go to that toggle, that drop-down menu towards the top, we can actually go to the different parameters, and we can see the gradients of green that we selected for the EC. We can go into soil temperature. We can see that everything is green because we didn't get anywhere 90 degrees. So there's one way to look at that information. One of the other things that we can do is we can do a color-coded gradient of a given surface. So you can see these grayed out areas with the white boundaries. Those are actually surfaces or just specific areas that we have defined right here in the app. I will show you how to do that here in a couple of minutes. But for right now, I'm just going to kind of give you an idea. We can touch on the gray in the background, and that will pop up the color-coded gradient map. We can actually resize that guy to see all the information on one screen, or we can scroll up and down. So you can see this is our gradient scale. This is the default gradient scale. And you can see where that gives us our moisture. You can see we're more than wet enough in the fairway area. Once we get down close to the green, where we may not be running all those heads over the green, we get a little bit drier, and so we get some interesting information there. It also tells you how many data points are within that fairway grouping of readings. It tells you what the minimum, what the high and low values are, and the average value. It'll give you a standard deviation and even a distribution uniformity value. So you can see there's some pretty interesting information that you can glean from that. We can also, when we have a lot of readings all bunched together like this, it can be a little bit tricky to find a spot in the gray that it likes. So we can actually go up to this drop-down menu and select from there. And if we drag this guy down here, we can actually look at them side by side. So this is the interpolated data. So basically what it's doing is it's taking what it knows about this point and what it knows about this point, and it's doing a calculation to tell us what those values between those is. And so you can really see some very interesting things. So a lot of times when I show this to people, the first thing they comment is, "Oh, I can see where the high spots and the low spots on that green are," and that may very well be the case. Or we could be looking at where there are hydrophobic soil conditions, where there are salt buildups, things like that. So there's some very interesting information that you can visualize in this way that you may not be able to see in another way. So we can just close that guy right out. What I'll do now is I'll go in and I will show you how we created this surface so that you will know how to custom define. So if we go to the top of the page here, we have some choices across the top of the page. We're going to go into the surface editor. We'll go ahead and choose our course that we want this surface to appear on. So basically, whenever we're looking at this course in the SpecConnect, we'll be able to see this surface. You can see here we have some already defined surfaces, or we can add a new surface, which is what we're going to do here. So it's going to ask us for a name, so we're just going to call this the test surface. So now we're actually in edit mode. It's waiting for us to populate some information. So if we scroll out and find a target, we can actually kind of zoom in and we'll just kind of go towards the edge and click. We get a pen. We just click and drag and draw the best we can with a mouse. And then it's going to give us individual plot points so that we can actually massage this thing out to get it closer to the outline that we're looking for. Once we're content with where that is, we just go up here. We can either clear it and start over if we're really unhappy with what it did, or we can just save it. So once it is saved, we can go back to the FieldScout viewer, which again is kind of our home base for this FieldScout information. And then here it is. That's the surface we just drew. So what happens is once we have defined this surface, just like what we saw over here, any readings that we take that that land in that surface is what makes up these color-coded gradient maps. So you can see we have inside the grayed out area, we have these readings. These readings are all included in this gradient map. These that fall outside of that border are not shown in this gradient. One of the other neat things that we can do is we can actually use our meter, particularly the TDR 350 meter, because it has the improved GPS on it. We can actually just use it as a site locator. We can locate different features that are on the golf course. So we have some examples here. So irrigation heads, irrigation satellites. You could do a tree audit. So, if you have a special application that you need to do, if you want to just show somebody where the trees are that need extra care, you want to do a visual map that shows the crew which trees you want pruned. You can also do a pin placement. We can show where our weather stations are located throughout the property. The beauty of these, and we have these check boxes, these become layers that we can turn on and off on any session. So anytime we're looking at a session mapping here, we can just turn on the irrigation heads, and then we can get a very interesting view of how our locations of our irrigation heads and the radius, the theoretical radius of throw, and how those overlap and what that might do or not do to influence where our wettest areas are at. So it's really pretty interesting information. And the beauty is you can turn it on and off whenever you want to, so you don't always have to be looking at it. But once you go through the work to set that up, that layer is always there and available, so you only have to set that up once, obviously, unless you change the configuration of a head or something, you might want to go in. But we can also turn on some of these other things, and I'll give you a quick view of what those are. So we've We've selected a different icon to represent the trees. This is an icon representing where a couple of satellites are sitting side by side off to the side, and then buried at the top of the map up here someplace I've got a weather station located. So that's a pretty neat little tool, and also fairly easy to use. We just go to the top of the page here. We go into Feature Editor. Again, we're going to tell it which course we're going to be on that we want to see these features on. We have a drop-down menu that shows us what the existing features are, or again, we can add a new feature group whenever we want to. So one way to do this is to take your TDR 350 out and hover it over or near the fixture that you want to record. So if we're doing a tree audit, perhaps you would stand next to this tree. You would just hover it over the ground. You would leave the rods out of the ground, and you would press the read button. So what you would get is a reading that would have a moisture value of 0.00, which is what we're looking at here with 0 markers. So if we had done that, we'd actually be looking at a clear plot point. One of those little teardrop things would be sitting right here. It would just be a black outline that you could use as a geolocation for that audit that you took. So in this case, we don't have that. But if we're going to go ahead and locate trees, we just go ahead and choose the feature group that we want to edit. We can say, okay, these are oak trees that we've already located, and when they did the audit, they missed this one. And so we would just touch on that point, and there it is. So if we were doing an irrigation head, we could actually double click on this. If we don't like it, or if that tree gets removed, we can actually delete that feature. Or if it were an irrigation head, we can actually go in here and say, this is a radius of 35. There we go. It gives us our radius, shows us right on the screen. So since this is for demonstration purposes only, we'll go in and we'll actually delete this one. This time I'll click OK and not cancel, and it's gone. So you're not locked into it. You can, as the course changes, you can make adjustments to those things. And when you're ready to go back in and analyze data, you go right back to the FieldScout viewer. And we're right back. So we've been looking at this same session at any time. So if we want to look at what happened on a different day, we would just go in and define the date range to narrow it down. So because over time, you'll get, if you're taking readings every day, you'll have a really long list of sessions. So the more you can dial in date ranges, the better it's going to be. The less you're going to have to look at in this drop-down menu. One of the other neat things we can do is run a report. So again, very database oriented, so we do definitely have to give it information in order to let it know what it is that we're looking for. So we can actually say we want to see what those 3 primary readings that the TDR 350 is taking, the moisture, the salts, and that surface temperature reading. We can determine whether or not we want to see features represented in this report or not. In this case, we're not going to do that. Then we'll select sessions. So since we only have one session that has those data types in it, that's all that's able to be selected. And then we can select the greens that we want to see. So we'll go to number 12 because that's the one that has all that really good information on it, all those readings. So we click Get Report. And it populates in another window. You can see the island green I selected, but there was no data in it. So you can see this is the moisture, how the moisture lays out on number 12 green. This is how the salts, how the salinity, that EC reading, that's how that lays out in this circumstance. And you can see this is how the soil temperature lays out. So obviously, as you're taking these readings throughout the course of season, you're going to be able to look at some very interesting side-by-side information. We can also go back in here and run a little bit different report. So if we just want to, we can do soil temperature because that tends to be one of the more consistent readings. We can do pin placement. I have to select my course. There's my session that has that data in it. Then I can just select some green surfaces. Can't remember exactly which ones I placed pins on, so I'm going to select them all. And then what we get is a bit of a pin placement map. So you can see this is where the pin is at. So you can actually create a report of all 18 holes. If you record that feature, you can actually create a excuse me, you can actually create a pin placement report to post in the pro shop for a tournament. Just a little bit of information to maybe make the members a little bit happier with the way things are going. The last little button up here is the export button. We can click on that, and what that's going to do is allow us to custom name a file, and that's going to export the data that we're looking at here into an Excel document. So you can see we have our latitude and longitude points. We have the data value that was collected, what that data value is. So in this case, we have at these coordinates, you can see these coordinates. So this is kind of all of the values that were taken with a single reading of a TDR 350. So the VWC, the period, the EC, the temperature, and the salinity index. So that's what all those values were on that. So you can use that to build out your own charts and graphs, but there's definitely some neat information available to you there. That kind of does it for the FieldScout. We'll go back in. So in the tray here, we have a dashboard. So depending on what equipment you have located, you can see we have a rain bucket on this one. We can actually zoom in and out on this map to find specific things. If we're signed up for alerts, we can actually check the status of our alerts. We can customize our alerts, and this dashboard is customizable with different widgets. We can also go here. This is going to be the equipment page, which is where we started out. So I did kind of showed you the FieldScout room, just a little bit on the watchdog room. So this is actual weather stations that we had out on a golf course in San Antonio when we were out at the golf show. We had a retriever, which is kind of the base station, and then we had two weather stations, a weather station and a sensor pup that were out recording data overnight. And so we can actually just click on the name of that, and we can see those are the sensor values that were being taken on that sensor pup. So a sensor pup is completely a blank slate. So you can choose whatever sensors you want to plug into it, up to 4 sensors. We could also go into the weather station. You can see we get a bunch of really cool, interesting information. So this is actually a 2900 ET weather station. So it's giving us a lot of good information. So we're actually getting a heat index, a dew point. We're getting wind speed and direction. We have this slider here that allows us to quickly check. So rain over the last hour, rain over the last 6 hours versus rain over the last 24 hours. So we can quickly go in there and see what's happened recently. We also get a line graph down here. So if we just click on a different parameter, we can see that the line graph updates, and we can see verification that at night it got dark, and in the morning the sun started to come up. So there's some really pretty interesting stuff that you can see just at a glance on this main page here for the weather station stuff. It also shows you the last time it communicated, which is well out of date because this equipment hasn't been in place since the golf show. but it's telling us what the communication status, how strong the communication was, and what the battery levels were at its last communication. We go into reports. There's a link back to our FieldScout viewer. There's even a FieldScout trend report. Trend report is interesting, but not really interesting enough to show you. It's going to just give you kind of a line graph of your moisture and EC readings. And since most of the time we don't have a date range to be able to plug in for that, that line graph is pretty much 1 point. So that is a report that is under development that we're looking to find a way to reference individual or multiple dates so that you can do some trending. But at this point, that is still to be hashed out. We do have a bunch of interesting reports here for the watchdog stuff. So if we have more than one weather station, or we can even look at the multiple sensors that are on a given weather station, or we can look at the same sensor. So if we have 2 weather stations and we want to compare how humidity is a difference between those 2 weather stations, this is a report we would select. In this case, we only have 1 weather station on here that was collecting that information. But if we go here, we actually have a little test component that we used. We can select it, we can run the report, and we're going to get no data. Well, we're going to have very strange data because it wasn't actually in place on these dates. And it didn't rain while we were there anyway, so not enough to tip anyway. If we can actually just customize this date range down to the week that we were on site, verify that we do have, and there we go. So we can see the test rain bucket didn't get installed until we got to the show floor, and then if you were at the show, you saw that we actually had a little bit of rain falling at all times, and so that thing ran for 2.5 days, and we got quite a bit of rain. But you can see that when we were out on the course, we got very minimal. You know, it was misting in the air, but as far as accumulated rainfall, we only got about 1/4 of an inch over that period of time. We go back to the reports page. You can see these are what we call canned reports. So we can do an hourly report, which will show us what's happened each hour. We do a daily report. We can actually track growing degree days, so we can actually set the clock when we want. We can actually choose the basis of what we want to measure. So we can actually choose the integral growing or sine. We go back again and define the dates to match the time when the equipment was in place. We choose the sensor, run the report, and you can see we get a report of how growing degree days advanced during that short period of time that the equipment was active on the site. We can do rainfall reports, ET reports, so there's a lot of really interesting stuff. If we had a soil moisture sensor also attached to a weather station, we could see a soil moisture report. We have the ability, we have these custom templates which allow you to start with the foundation of an existing report, but then you can edit it to add and delete parameters that make sense to you. Once you save that, that would actually show up under this custom reports tab, so that you wouldn't have to recreate that every time. You'd be able to go back into your own custom report and run that at any point to see what it is that you're looking at. We can actually look at a map view that will show us where some equipment is at. We actually have the drop-down list, and depending on what sensors that you have attached to the weather station, you can actually choose which parameters are in the pop-up box. We also have, not assigned to this account, but we have disease models. So we have 4 or 5 turf disease models currently active. We have a bunch of other models for like apple scab and stuff like that some of our fruit, nut, and vegetable customers use. We also have disease models. We have some turf disease, insect models. We have some turf insect models active as well. And then the last little thing down here, this little cloud, actually gives us the ability to manually upload data from meters. So if you don't want your assistants to have to use their own personal phones, or if the guy in the watering crew doesn't have his own smartphone, he doesn't have to have the app going. You can actually upload the data log off of the meter onto a USB stick, upload that to the computer, and then you would just use this to upload from there. Same thing with the TDR 300. SC900 is our soil compaction meter that has an ultrasonic sensor. That one you would need an external GPS in order to get the GPS data for it to be able to be uploaded to SpecConnect, but that information is available. And then we have some other stuff here. We also have the ability to connect the underground stuff. So hopefully you can see we have some really pretty cool stuff available in here, just a way to keep track of your information. As we were looking at in all the reporting and stuff is, we have date ranges and the ability to track data over time. So you can actually choose weather stations. You can make public, so you can actually get a URL. So if you want to embed your weather station to show the data right on the club website, you can do that. There's some very interesting and very cool stuff that you can do here. But that's going to do it for now. We might get back in with some additional videos at some point, digging a little bit deeper into how to use some of these reports and how to take things a little bit further. Appreciate your time, and hope that you'll be signing up for SpecConnect soon. Thanks.